Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Mr. Long Island Searches for Truth and Beauty. This afternoon we have a very special guest, Karen Garvey. Karen, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And it's the unique combination of truth and beauty. We don't get that too often, and believe it or not, I'm not referring to myself, I'm referring to Karen. But we have some really fascinating topics to go over today, so I want to thank you very much for joining us. But before we launch into the really good stuff, we have to know, where's your favorite pizza place on Long Island?
I knew that would come up.
Well, yeah, we'll explain why you knew that would come up in a few minutes, but go ahead.
All right, I'll have to go with At Home with Nana's Recipe.
All right, but
okay.
you have people coming in from out of town. You really want to show off Long Island.
Then I would invite them over.
Then you would invite them over. Okay, so if you're really interested in good pizza, you're going to go to Karen's house. That's great. Karen Garvey, you've been described as an intuitive, as a life coach, as a personal coach, professional coach. Walk us through a little bit about what an intuitive is, and tell us a little bit about how you came to realize you had this special skill set.
Okay, it's a very good question, and I'll try to give you the abbreviated version. I come from a family that really values the intellect, so I took a very academic route, and I did well in business. I was successful, but I really didn't have any access to a spiritual belief system that was, taught to me or spoken about around our home. What did change was I was working as an independent business consultant in the late 90s, and I would go for a run a few mornings a week before I began my day. And on the morning of 9/11, I got back from my run, and as I was standing, opening up the garage door to get back into the house, I experienced what was happening at the World Trade Center on that morning as it was happening.
Without any knowledge that it was going on. Okay.
I live about an hour from there, so I couldn't have any physical clues, of course. But immediately, I'm not prone to just having imaginary, creepy thoughts pop into my head. So that's how it struck me, that I was doing something wrong by allowing myself to think these things and see these things. But it was really under a minute when I was in the house, someone was asking me to turn on the television, and I was able to connect what I experienced in the driveway to what was actually happening in real life. And as I was standing there watching the television, and a broadcaster was making suppositions about it being one small plane off its course, not only did I realize that I was experiencing it at the same time, but I also understood that I had gotten a download of information about what was transpiring, not just the physical events. So it was an awakening to me that I recognized on that day that our conscious energy is not connected to our bodies, and that was a huge revelation for me.
Explain your conscious. Well, explain that to me a little bit.
I rather than call it thoughts, because sometimes you only think of your thoughts being generated by your brain. Okay. I think of us as conscious beings. We are energy. And if you're able to be simultaneously at a place an hour from where you live and to be experiencing what's going on there, then obviously the conscious part of me in human form is not connected or sewn into this body.
Okay.
It can't be two places at once.
Right.
So a part of me had to be able to leave this locale and go somewhere else, which I do on a regular basis now, but the first time you stumble upon something like that, it's odd. It's awakening for sure.
Now, obviously, you didn't have an idea about what was going on. I mean, what were you feeling? What were you going through? Did you sit down and just kind of wonder what was going on, or what transpired then?
If I had a catalyst like that with, kind of paralleling an event that was larger than life, but it didn't have such consequence as 9/11 had,
right,
I probably would have spent more time focusing on what I experienced that day, but I backburnered it very quickly because in comparison to what else was going on, it was insignificant. And I didn't have language for it. I didn't have people who had spiritual vocabulary that I spoke to about things that were esoteric, so I didn't have anywhere to go with it that day. I pretty much banked it.
Okay.
I did have a spark of hope that day that other people might not have had that day, because the experience of knowing simultaneously information that I didn't have any earthly means to made me understand that there was something more significant about our earth reality than I was supposing. So I gave myself permission not to write that day as awfully as everybody else was writing it in that moment. I didn't know how to, how to relate to it or how to store it. I just wasn't going to store it the same way everybody else would.
So because of this intuition, this insight, you understood it better than anybody that there's a bigger picture involved.
Yes.
And you had access to, I don't want to say information or knowledge that empowered you to understand that there was much more going on than just this horrific event.
Yes.
And you've parlayed that into a career almost seems insignificant to say after that. But walk us through a little bit about that skill set that you have, or that intuition.
Okay. I did backburner my experience for a significant amount of time, but I guess momentum got the best of me because I started to experience simultaneous information about lots of happenings all over the world or in my neighborhood with 100% accuracy. It wasn't like I was getting images and wasn't able to correlate it to something happening. I always knew that within 24 hours I would get the evidence of what I experienced, and I did. And then I started to experience almost like the ticker that goes across the bottom of a news program that was not showing me the physical intersection of people. It was giving me indications of the meaning of life, reason behind why people intersect the way they do. And you know, it's interesting, but back in 2003, 2004, when I was getting these concepts, it was still very much unknown on Earth, some of these ideas, and I think they're more commonplace, so it shows how far we've come in 10 years. But I was hearing things like, you know, we are not our bodies, we are spiritual beings having a physical existence. Within every challenge, there is benefit. Seeking the benefit and unfolding and integrating the benefit is what helps you to grow as a soul and then to advance and preferably have fewer challenges to help you with that growth in the future. So as I was still managing, sorting out my own difficulties from childhood, I found that these messages were helping me become clear. I was able to understand my own personal history in a way that I was able to let go of pain. I was able to comprehend other people's interactions with me and how I was hurt. So the peace that I was gaining was a compelling reason why I decided that this is something I want to share in whatever capacity I can.
I want to come back to that, but I also want to ask you, why Karen Garvey, why not Michael White? I mean, how come you got this and I didn't, or do I get this and I just don't recognize it?
I believe that the reason that I had the opening on that first day was very simple. Number one, the event was energetically significant. I knew a lot of people that were affected that day, so the conscious energy was intimately connected to me. And also, oddly enough, I wasn't much of an exerciser until a couple of years before that, but as it turns out, that running is what allowed me to clear my mind and quiet the left brain so that the right brain, which does connect to our eternal knowledge, could be the one that was having this conversation with the universe. So it wasn't just that it was me, it was just like a perfect storm of events that corresponded on the same moment. The other part is that our society is enamored with the intellect. You know, basically everything we teach people from their birth is the importance of academic achievement, how smart you are, how well you do in school. Even elements of behavior are considered about, you know, whether you're smart or not. Smart people behave better in school than non-smart. This is, you know, concepts that we have. So being enamored with the intellect, it doesn't leave a lot of conversation for the value of intuition. So it's not that I'm special in this. It's simply that I had an opening that I took, and most people don't even understand that there's such a value in reopening their intuitive nature. So everybody has the ability to rediscover it, reconnect. They're doing it all the time. And the more we have conversations about it openly and people don't feel embarrassed about it, the more open conversation there is, more people will give themselves permission to assign intuition as the resource that's allowing them to do some of the good things that they do.
Now, Wayne Dyer talks about the power of intention, and intention being that connection that you have to a higher power, to God, or whatever name you want to assign to it. But it's really, in my interpretation of it, it's just embracing that, like you said before, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And once you can understand that big picture, you almost kind of relax and understand that there's a higher power in place. Is that your mission now, is to get people to understand that there's something much bigger than what we deal with on a daily basis going on?
Yes, most definitely. And to understand the principle behind having a partnership between ourselves and the universe, if you will, however you want to look at it. Whether you see the partnership as between you and other people, because they're still connected to us all being one, or you see it as being a higher power, and it could be a higher power manifesting itself in other people, but understanding that you're not alone, understanding that feeling of isolation or limit or being different or being invisible, that's just an illusion, and it's bringing out the truth, which is that we are all connected and that we are all supporting each other. And the more you manifest that truth and really start to live it, your life just becomes simpler and happier. And my goal is to help as many people become happier as I can while I'm here. So that's what I aim to do.
Well, what's the biggest challenge you face when you explain to people what you do and you walk them through it? What's the most common defensive reaction that you get, or what kind of defenses that you get that you have to kind of break down?
Interestingly, you know, I see us as being vibrational, and as vibrations, we really do attract in reflections of ourselves to a large degree. So the more comfortable I am with knowing our eternal nature and the ability to access the partnership that we have in the universe, the less I attract in people who are naysayers or need to be contentious with me. So I don't really have a lot of, you know, butting heads with people. And the other part of it too is that I don't need to convert anybody. Okay. I don't need to convince anybody, and I don't need to advise anyone. But if they stumble upon me or they ask a question or they're curious, at least that means that they're open to the possibility, and I'll answer their questions to the best of whatever questions they form in the moment. If the questions end, then that means their moment for that conversation or that new information, that it's over for them in that moment. I might be a catalyst for them to continue to make new discoveries somewhere else, or they may integrate something that they learned today and they might have an awakening about it in 3 days, 5 years, 6 months, and they might come back and say, I get it, I see it, I got to witness it, I got to validate it, and then the conversation opens again.
So you just put your message out there, and whether or not someone decides to accept it, it's up to them.
Yes.
Okay, but I know you also do a lot of public speaking or public seminars. I would imagine anyone who's there kind of buys into what you're talking about, so it's not really too much. But even conversation with people that maybe aren't aware of what you do, I'd be curious to know what's the most common skeptical response you get, or what frustrates you most about this intuition that you have.
One thing that I do find funny is on occasion I'll have a person say, I just want you to know that I am the biggest skeptic out there, and I was determined not to believe anything that you said when I sat down, but I just want to say that what you said really resonated with me. And then they inevitably will share a story about how after their grandfather died, how, you know, this amazing thing of a pocket watch appearing on their nightstand happened, and that him and his grandfather always had this pocket watch between them. So they'll show some mini miracle that had happened in their own journey that they never spoke about to anyone because they were embarrassed and they didn't want anyone thinking they were crazy, but now they reveal it to me. So it's more of me giving people permission to assign intuition and to assign our eternal nature to the magnificent things that do happen in our journey. They lose the embarrassment of feeling like they're different or they would be chastised.
So you almost validate feelings that they already have.
Yes.
They just never felt comfortable either buying into it or expressing that.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about, everyone knows the Long Island medium for existence, and you're not a medium. You're not that. Tell us a little bit about the difference then.
Okay, mediumship is a specific kind of psychic ability or intuitive ability, and it's a skill set that is honed, and it takes a lot of training. I remember listening to John Edward talk about how he developed his skill, and he'll talk about in the first couple of years all the fairs that he did and how many, wrong messages he got and how many people were like not happy with his, his feedback, but he said it was a training ground for a couple of years. He did reading after reading after reading, because when you're getting intuitive information, you have to learn what to do with it. You have to have a frame of reference for it. You have to learn how to interpret it. Interpretation is the biggest challenge in being intuitive. So for me, I didn't spend a great deal of time honing in on only communicating with souls that are no longer in their bodies like a strict medium would. It is something that happens. It happens in sessions with coaching clients. It happens all the time. It's magnificent when it happens, and I do love and appreciate it. But what I do value as well is that there are people out there like the Long Island Medium and John Edward who are bringing millions and millions of people to the belief that we are eternal. And they're giving them comfort so that they can release their state of grief, or at least start to move past the state of grief and feel the connection with those who have died. So for me, it's almost as though that's my training ground. Once people get to the point that they understand we are eternal and they acknowledge and accept it, then they can come to see me, and I say, now that we know we're eternal, what good is it? Other than moving past grief, other than knowing that your loved ones are okay, how can you use it to implement these suggestions into your life to become happier? How can you become, more fit? How can you become more energetic? How can you have better relationships? How can you have a better relationship with abundance? That, to me, is the exciting part of what it is that they do.
Well, let's go back to something. Let's tie that into something you mentioned or you alluded to earlier. Embracing this notion of eternal spirituality, and how more and more people are doing that. And the example you used in a prior conversation is you talked about the proliferation of yoga studios in downtown Long Island, where you didn't see them 10 years ago. You see more and more people embracing that spirituality, that need to connect to that higher energy. And you also have shared with me that by 2020, the clear vision, more and more people are going to understand their role here on Earth and hereafter. Would you walk us through that a little bit, please?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I like that people can look out their windows and validate some of the messages that they hear. And when you do see the proliferation of yoga studios, and you hear more and more about people who are becoming Reiki masters and so on, and you can witness people becoming more harmonious with nature, with their own bodies, you get to see that there's only one direction that this is going to head. But my perception, my intuitive perception of what is happening in this time on Earth right now is that we're in a period of accelerated enlightenment. So it's not just advancing and plugging along statically, it's about the movement is profound. So between now and 2020, it's a good idea to use that knowledge and be on, I always see this as like a line between negative and positive. There's this line of neutrality. Now that you know this, just make the choice that you want to move away from being below the line and come above the line. When you start to know the tools and the techniques to really live above the line, not only do you become happier, but you become a resource for helping others learn how to get above the line and stay above the line. My feeling about this is that energetically, the number of, not the number of people, but the energy below the line on Earth, maybe some people, their energy is metaphorically the size of a pea, right, or a golf ball. But the size of someone energetically is a grapefruit above the line. Energetically, the amount of energy above the line by the year 2020 will be greater than that below the line. And that's the point of momentum shifting. So we're heading there so quickly. To me, I believe we're going to we'll begin to see a whole new world developing after 2020. Doesn't mean life is going to be perfect in 2020. It took us a lot of years to get ourselves into the mess we're in here. It's going to take us some time to get out of that mess. But the principles of enlightenment will be more enacted and more in effect, and more people will honor and respect themselves, the planet, the earth, each other, the value of love, and just basically eternally known and discovered truths.
Well, I think that's really encouraging, because especially in the wake of 9/11, I feel that more and more people live their lives in fear. And fear is a major product being pushed by the media and by corporations, and you know, you have to be afraid for your life, and you got to eat this and drink that, otherwise you're going to die.
Right.
As people become more in tune with the reality and embrace the message that you're sending, they can feel better about themselves and understand that just because it's saying that in a TV commercial doesn't make it true.
Yes. Yes, that's a lot of what I talk about at seminars, is about the power of fear. And fear is, it's got the same vibration as the vibration of hate. Fear and hate are the absence of the vibration of love. The challenge for us today is that fear is socially acceptable and promoted. Hate is no longer socially acceptable or promoted. So we've just swapped out one poor vibration for another poor vibration. So now it takes a lot of people waking up and saying, I opt out of fear. I opt out.
You mentioned the seminars. You conduct seminars, you've written books, you do coaching. Why don't you walk us through a little bit of that and what someone might expect to learn from reading one of your books or going to one of your seminars?
Okay, I've written 5 books now. 3 of them are what I call channeled material now. Okay. I just listen to the information that comes to me through this conduit that I have learned how to open and keep open. And it's designed to help us peel away the mistruths that we have learned and been taught on Earth so that we can get closer to the core of ourselves and our happiness. And the books are very engaging in that if you can't be at a seminar, or you can't do a coaching session, or you can't do ongoing coaching, it's a tool that's there with those truths in writing over and over and over again for you to refer to. Seminars, that's probably one of my favorite aspects of what I do. It's a very exciting thing to have people come and watch their faces and see shifts and see aha moments, and to get the feedback of how different pieces of information that are so contrary to the things that they'd heard all their lives just help them to get a spark or feel their shine again. So for me, that's incredibly rewarding to see that result.
I would imagine so, and it just kind of makes you feel better and inspires you to continue on with your message. Talk a little bit about the law of attraction and the law of abundance. How does that work? How do people tap into it? You know, everyone's heard of The Secret. How does that work?
Interestingly, the very first of these books that I had told you about that I wrote, called The Answers, was released in the same month that The Secret was released in. And if you read both books, they have some similar passages in them, which to me is just one tiny form of validation about that there's universal truth. There's a river of universal knowledge, and anyone can tap into it at any given time. Myself and the Secret author had tapped in at exactly the same moment. The Secret is, again, it's a great introduction to the power that you have. Where I like to take off after The Secret ended is to let people understand not only is there this component of attraction, but that you have the power to be in the driver's seat of your own journey with a lot of other techniques other than just what's in that book. You know, it's not enough to just envision a happy life or to envision what it is that you want, whether it's diamonds and watches or to, you know, open up a charitable organization. It's not just vision. There's more to it. And when you understand the full formula, then you can make that formula work on your behalf. And the full formula is that how we create our physical reality is based on what we think, which I would say would be the envisioning part, what we feel, how we feel about it. Are we feeling nervous? Do we get that kind of crunchy feeling in here, or a snag in our gut? Or do we feel positive and high about it? Combine that with what you believe, and the belief system is usually the most unconscious, so sometimes it's kind of snapping at our ankles when we're not aware, because we're conscious of our thoughts, we can be conscious of our feelings, but becoming conscious of your beliefs is a little more tenuous.
Can you explain the difference between what I think and what I believe?
Okay, a great simple example would be if your grandmother always told you that if you go outside in the winter with your hair wet, you're going to catch pneumonia.
Okay.
Then there's a likelihood that when you're older, if that's something that's stuck to you, that thought, that when you go outside with wet hair when you're older, you might wind up with a cold or the sniffles or a sore throat or pneumonia. So that's a thought. All right, and now you believe it. Those thoughts are based on your beliefs. Now you could go out there and say, you know what, I don't think I'm going to get sick. I don't think I'm going to get sick. But if you haven't changed the belief that your grandmother told you you will get sick if you go outside with wet hair, then all the thinking in the world isn't going to convert your reality.
So you still have that deep-seated, that deeply rooted belief that I'm going to get sick if I go outside with wet hair.
It's still going to happen.
And no matter how many positive thoughts you have,
yes.
If it's so, how do you cleanse yourself of these erroneous beliefs? So how do you even know it's wrong?
Well, I give 3-day seminars as well as 2-hour, 3-hour, 6-hour seminars, and we do a lot of exercises. I really think that experiential learning is the best way that we get to hold on to what we hear. You can listen to philosophy all you want, but philosophy can often go in one ear and out the other. But when you experience something and you have the ability to see a transition, then it can become a part of you. So what I work on is I always work on having some kind of a tool that's physical in addition to the knowledge. So when you have a physical tool that you can execute and use, then you're bringing the mind into it because you're thinking to use it. You're allowing more spirit into your world because that's the nature of where the truth is coming from. By bringing your body into it, you've made the whole thing whole. We are a mind and a body and a spirit. It is a sphere. And if any one of them is not on board, then that ball can be imbalanced, or it can be static and unable to move.
And if that's out of balance, then nothing seems to be working. It's that balance that's so, that yin and yang that's so crucial.
Yes.
Wow.
If I could draw right now like I would draw in a seminar, I show it as a circle. But if you think of it more as a sphere, the mind pushes the body pushes the spirit, and the spirit pushes the mind, and then reverse that. If you take any element out of the ongoing perpetual circle, something will be off balance, something will be unhappy.
And that's why it's so important that you eat properly, you get the rest that you need, and you take care of that physical body that you have, because that's the conduit for the thoughts coming through.
And even as far as the body, there is a very easy possibility of going to an extreme about how we believe we have to keep our bodies clean. And a lot of it is fear-based. So I also caution people to become too dramatic or obsessed about the management of their own health. Everybody has a different propensity toward being at their best energetically based on how they eat, how they sleep, how they exercise. There is no absolute right or wrong for anyone, just as there is no absolute right or wrong about a food that you can consume that makes you feel good and something that I can consume that makes me feel good. So I ask people, don't listen to, the flavor of the month expert that's saying, get rid of all weed, or whatever, sugar is the pathway to all evil. It's about listening to your body, being intuitive with your own body, and seeing what does make you feel good. You'll know if it's making you feel good or not, if it's something you should add, something you should lessen. You will know it. You're your own best expert.
You trust your intuition.
Yes.
This has been fascinating, as I expected. And as a wrap-up, is there any one thing, one notion that you'd want to dismiss, or one notion that you'd want to share with everybody that sums up what you do, or makes it easier for them to embrace what you're talking about? Is there any message that you would want to get out there?
I think probably a good way to acknowledge and accept possibility is to think about a moment when you were embroiled in a challenge, and perhaps it was something that was difficult for you to get over for days or weeks. And then all of a sudden, in a moment, you felt happy. Accidentally, you felt happy. In that moment, you knew your challenges just melted away and they were an illusion. Just look at those moments and understand that that's the truth. That's at the core of what we are capable of being and experiencing and knowing. And so every time you are embroiled in a feeling of negativity or a lack of power, try to remember those great and happy moments as a way to shift out of the illusion of feeling unhappy. And
know to just kind of step back and take a deep breath and just say, okay, as the Buddhists say, everything is temporary. And move on, and that's very empowering.
Yes.
This has been terrific, Karen. Thank you so much. It was great hearing more about this. And your website is
KarenGarvey.com.
And all the events that you do, the seminars are listed there, and anybody who wants to find out more about the books you have, the tapes, the CDs, whatever, you can go KarenGarvey.com and learn more about that. So thank you so much for your time today. I know how busy you are. This is a real honor to be here, and we're very grateful for your presence.
Great to see you.
It's been
Always.
another episode of Mr. Long Island's Search for Truth and Beauty. Lucky me, I found both this afternoon. I'm very excited, and I want to thank you for sticking with us.